Hey, Happy New Year and welcome back to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi. It is actually literally the new year. It is January 1.
2020.
Yeah, about 4:30 in the afternoon. Everybody's fine. We have beer, so not hair of the dog type of things. We're responsible adults last night. But anyway, so yeah, Happy New Year. And we're going to be obviously talking about when there's no Mandalorian to talk about.
Oh.
But there were a whole lot of Baby Yoda New Year memes that were just spot on. I just loved it.
Well, that's the thing. He's the breakout star of the show, weirdly enough.
So, and I think eventually we'll talk about the entire season as a whole. But for today, we're going to be just kind of focusing on the Rise of Skywalker, since I think everybody's seen it multiple times now.
Mm-hmm.
We will get into spoilers today, so if you haven't seen it,
we should just put that on the pod. We're just going to talk. If I don't know, don't go listening to a podcast if you haven't gone to see the movie. But we give that warning. Sure, you can turn it off now if you like, or you can wait until after we do our trivia. But we have to introduce. Sorry, sitting around my table in the midst of Gentilly in New Orleans, we have Dave and Fredo and Aaron. Everybody say hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, hello. And the Saints have the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday.
Sunday at noon.
So high noon.
High noon. Doo-doo-doo.
Yeah, I think
we're back in the Mandalorian feel things with that.
And I will say that, and Dave is wearing a Florida State hat in the house that is a true Husker house. And, the only team we hate more in Florida State is Miami. So that's where we can have common ground,
Yeah, sure.
But
yeah,
anyway,
we all hate Miami.
As long as he doesn't do the tomahawk chop thing, we'll be fine. Otherwise, we'll have to edit that out.
Also, if there are any Miami listeners out there, we don't hate you. Thank you for listening. So.
Yeah, just your football team. Anyway, but yeah, we'll start off with our fun bit of Star Wars Saga trivia, and yeah, we might have to update it when they update it with things. Which, by the way, before we do this, you guys seen? We were talking about it a little bit last night. The Star Wars Cards Against Humanity is being released.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I had friends who got like a preview copy of that, and they said it was awful.
Awful.
It said
That's
it was
disappointing.
It was 501st Friends. Yeah, they said it was like just kind of it was kind of lame. It was poorly edited, and maybe it was because it was a pre-release type thing. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But maybe that'd be a fun episode. We'll do a late night episode where we're playing Star Wars Cards Against Humanity and have to put a not safe for work,
not safe for work, not safe for school, maybe not safe for most human consumption. So
anyway, all right. So I'll have Dave, you got to start off. You'll ask me the question, then I'll go to Fredo, and Fredo will go to you.
Sounds good. Who delicately informs Lord Vader the Emperor commands you to make contact with him?
It's very interesting you say that. I'm going to let people think about this, but I'm looking over your shoulder at a picture of the very guy who did this. One of my favorite pictures. It was the very first con that I went to. Well, no, not the very first one, but I went to this one in Omaha, and sitting behind me in this theater was the guys who played Admiral Ozzel and Admiral Piet. Both, they're sitting right next to each other, and they're right behind me, and they're discussing the fall of the Roman Empire. That was a very surreal moment. And so after this whole presentation or whatever, and it was a great con because you got to intermingle with them. I actually shared a beer with the guy who played Logray, and so that was awesome. I actually sat at the table, I think, with the guy who played Leatherface. It wasn't just a Star Wars con. It was but anyway, so I digress. But it was Admiral Piet.
This is correct.
And Ken Conley. And so, yeah, I have the photo of me, Admiral Piet, and Admiral Ozzel, and it's autographed. So that's, it's kind of fun. I remember when I had him sign that, actually, because he just sat there and just looked at the picture for about, silently for about, a minute. And it was just obviously he was just kind of moved by this. It was just kind of neat thing. So, yeah. Anyway,
I'm glad that you added the Admiral in there too, because he had recently been promoted when.
That's true. Yeah, he did get promoted. All right, sorry, I went on a long story there, but so that's kind of fun. By the way, another article that I had, or another autograph I have somewhere in here, is David Prowse. I think he wrote it on the Star Wars figure over there. He always signed it, David Prowse is Darth Vader.
He's not letting that go.
Anyway. Okay, so I'm just going to pick this one. All right. Fredo, who's described as most displeased, that was air quotes for a podcast, okay, most displeased with the lack of progress on the second Death Star?
Oh, well, okay.
Who's described as most displeased? Yeah.
So I'll give everybody kind of a moment to think about it. Think of the scene. I don't have any funny stories about meeting the actor who said that or the actor who they're referring to. So, but the answer is the Emperor.
Emperor Palpatine. Yep. Yes, sir.
He is most displeased with the apparent lack of effort.
That's a good stout. So I just took my first drink. It's Port Orleans stout. So shout out to Port Orleans there. But anyway, yeah, it's a good stout.
All right. Okay, Dave. Who pilots the snow speeder that brings down the first Imperial Walker?
Ooh, the first Imperial Walker. I'm gonna guess Wedge.
That is correct. It's Wedge Antilles.
And what was his gunner's name?
Oh, okay, now I've got the scene playing in my head. Was it? No, it wasn't Dak. It says the guy who gets killed with Luke.
I think I know.
Go ahead.
Was it Jansen?
Yeah, nice shot, Jansen.
That's
yeah,
right.
There you go. So, yeah. All right. Well, that was our trivia for the day. And we have a gazillion more cards eventually, so we'll have to do this every podcast. But today we're going to be talking again about the Rise of Skywalker. Now, in our last episode, we gave our initial, kind of overarching reviews of it, and I think we've discussing it that we're all kind of just like, yeah, it was good. It wasn't the greatest thing we ever saw, wasn't the worst thing we ever saw. We enjoyed it, and it's tough when we're going to be starting to be critical of the movie. We don't want to make you feel like we hated the movie, because I didn't. I actually listened to another podcast, and I agree with this guy. He said, I'd liked it because it was Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I was watching a Star Wars movie, and that's, I think every single one of them, there's, we could go through ranking 1 through 9 and, the other 2 movies, whatever you want to do. But ultimately it's like, I'm going to enjoy watching a Star Wars movie. That's just, and the day that I don't, then I don't know, that'll be tough. But anyway, so we all kind of, we're kind of in the middle, right?
Yep.
I think.
Mm-hmm. I want to make sure that caveat's up front in case we start to slag the heck out of this movie, but our intention is to not do that. So,
well, when I was an instructional coach, I would go into teachers' classrooms and watch them teach, and then try to get feedback on how to become a better teacher. And it's tough to say, gee, Dave, you did all this horribly, and if you did all those things better, then you'd be a better teacher. I mean, that's not going to work, right?
Right.
So you have to talk about the positives that they do, and I'd always lead off with things that I liked, and I'd ask them, what things did you like? Because it is so easy to focus on the negative, and there are, in everything that we do, there are negatives. When listening to music, it's like, I wish I could have had, something different. But anyway, I digress again. So yeah, we don't hate the movie.
No, I think it's obviously there's going to be differences of opinion between a large group of fans. That's to be expected. There's going to be a variety of what people liked and didn't like. It's funny, just right now I was coming over from the pub watching a soccer game, and we got to discussing about The Mandalorian. I was talking about it with 3 other friends, and 2 of them loved the episode of The Mandalorian, The Prisoner, and one of them hated it. I'm right. Like, and I was just taken aback. I'm like, how could you have hated that episode? But she did not like it. She found it to be too disposable. She didn't like any of the characters that they interacted with. She says, like she said that this was the first role that she saw Natalia Tena in, who played the Twi'lek, that she did not like her in. And I'm like, I'm just taken aback. So sometimes you have to acknowledge up front that differences of opinion does not necessarily, or difference of opinion about a work of art, a piece of art, does not necessarily denote that you did not like it or did not enjoy it. It just means, okay, there's going to be some stuff in there that you're going to point to that will detract from your enjoyment, or that you didn't like as much as somebody else, and that's all subjective.
And I think there's something also very important to talk about here is when I would work with teachers in teaching instructional theory, is we'd always talk about the difference between value and liking. Mm-hmm. That there's a big difference there, and a lot of people don't find that can't find that difference, that they think because I don't like it, it has no value.
Right.
So I think as we're talking, so again, Emerald could come in here and cook us a meal, and by all accounts, it's going to be an awesome meal, but I might not like it because I don't like this flavor, or don't like, that texture or something like that. But that doesn't make it a bad meal, And so I think when you get into the critiques of the movie, I think it's important that, we didn't like certain things, but, if you want to discuss the value of it, is how does it fit within the broader, saga story, things like that. And I think that is a fair conversation to have, but that you need to have that distinction between, because I didn't like it doesn't mean that it has no value in the Star Wars universe.
And I was just going to say, and it's important to recognize that there's a difference between what your thoughts are for the movie as a movie itself, as one piece of work. And then you can have a completely different set of thoughts about how it fits within the sequel trilogy and then within the overall Star Wars saga. These are completely different trains of thought. You can say, oh, I like the movie. I don't necessarily like how it answers some of the questions I've been having since 2015. Or I don't necessarily know how I feel about it, how it fits with the whole episode, Skywalker saga tale, as that's its final piece. Those are appropriate. You have to be able to recognize, okay, I can like this or not necessarily like that, or I like how they did this but didn't necessarily that. So that's going to be kind of crucial, as people absorb and acknowledge and process this movie.
I can give you one last thought on this too. I do like a comic book movie ranking on my blog, daveglado.com. There's my quick plug. But I rank comic book movies, and I just write a few words on each. And I've gotten a lot of backlash from people, and they're like, well, how could you not think, for example, Avengers Endgame is the greatest comic book movie of all time? And I said, well, I try to step back from it, and I try to evaluate based not on my initial feelings of, wow, that was awesome, and just look at it as a work. And would I recommend this piece of art to other people to go experience, and within that context, then it's not as high for me. So,
well, it's also, I mean, to dumb it down, to even more rudimentary level, it's like we could all go to McDonald's and get a cheeseburger, and oh my God, at the right time of day and given your mood, that is the best thing you have ever had in all of your life. Yep. You know what I mean? You're just enjoying that cheeseburger so much, but it is crap when it comes to food overall. Look,
we all live in New Orleans. We've all been out of Mardi Gras parade routes. McDonald's cheeseburger after you've been standing on a parade route for 4 hours, and in the cold, is the greatest thing ever. And you've been drinking, it can be the greatest thing ever. Doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna go back the next day and do it again. Yeah. But in that moment, it works.
So so what
we're damning with faint praise here.
Yes.
What I want to start off with, though, is that when I'm looking at my Facebook feed, my Twitter feed, I'm really seeing I don't fit in with it right now, because I'm seeing either people saying, this was the greatest thing ever, JJ delivered, he is genius, and it did everything I needed and more, oh my God, early Christmas present, they're all over the moon. To the opposite side of people saying, this was the most worthless thing I've ever seen, you can see they're mad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, I find myself in the middle. It's kind of like when I was a sophomore in high school, my high school band went to New York City we went to the Kickoff Classic, and so it was the first time I'd ever been in any city like, bigger than really Lincoln, Nebraska, so yeah, Hickville, but anyway. And so, we get there and we see New York City, and, I called my dad and he's like, so how's New York? And I'm just like, yeah, it's all right. I mean, I was seeing a lot of cool things, but my reaction is, yeah, it's all right. I mean, that's the way I felt about Rise of Skywalker. I was like, did not like it. I didn't, I was just like, it's cool. There's some really good moments. I enjoyed it, but I didn't have those hyper reactions. So what I want to talk about, and we've all seen people have those hyper reactions.
Right.
So let's kind of just digest, why do you think people are, first of all, over the moon with this movie? And this is all just speculation. This is all just our, we don't have any data to back any of this up, but why do you think those people who think that JJ hit a home run, why do we think?
Well, one of the things that when I came into the movie, I think we were talking about expectations, either within the context of the show or outside of the show. And I said I just wanted spectacle out of the thing. That was really my only expectation coming into it. Well, they delivered on that. And I think like that's a reason that a lot of people have responded positively. It's just the sheer immensity of the thing. Oh my gosh, look at that lightsaber fight. Look at all those ships. Look at these crazy familial connections that didn't exist before. You're giving me Star Wars in a very kind of in-your-face way, like almost exaggerating what Star Wars had already been. Oh, you like these sorts of this family drama? We're giving you more family drama, more than you've ever had before. You like seeing a lot of ships, fly at each other. We're going to give you as many ships as we possibly can give you. And it just kind of like on and on and on down the line. If you evaluate it in those terms, yeah, I mean, like it's a big, loud, crazy film, jam-packed with tons of stuff. And I think if you go into that with that mindset, and again, I don't want to damn with faint praise, but it's like I just wanted a popcorn movie that I could just go and enjoy for a couple of hours and take my mind off of my troubles. I think this movie really delivers in those terms.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say you have to consider the creator, and I mean the director, J.J. Abrams. And what I mean to say with that is, look at the kind of movies he's made. He's made Super 8. He made Mission Impossible 3. He made the first 2 Star Trek reboots, and then now he's done 2 Star Wars movies. He is, as much as anybody can be, a very strong disciple of Steven Spielberg. I'm going to give the audience what they want. I'm going to deliver. You want action? I'll give you action. You want comedy? I'll give you comedy. And he's very much somebody who is well-versed in the genre oeuvre, to put it that way, of the 1980s. So he's channeling all that into this.
And I'll put it into a musical context again. Mm-hmm. I mean, having been in a band and having watched bands and stuff like that, that where I think bands fail. Actually, let me back up. I'm going to say where this one band I watched they did such a great job. I remember sitting there, this is many years ago, and they played a lot of covers because it was a Friday night, club where people go out and they want to hear a band and they want to hear Brown Eyed Girl and stuff like that. But anyway, they played a bunch of covers, and then they would play an original, and then they'd play a couple more covers, and then they'd play another couple originals, and then they'd play a bunch of covers again. So they kept, it's like you said, you give them what you want. I remember with my own band, there's times where I wanted to, like we developed these almost just some great arrangements in our Irish band that we knew would just totally lose the community concert audience or the pub audience, depending on what we're playing. So we had to sometimes put our favorite things off to the side because the audience is the one paying the bill.
Right.
Now, so I'm gonna back up a little bit. So like I said, this band, where I see bands sometimes it gets tough. It's like people will leave a show early if it's all original stuff. They don't feel bad about leaving, but it's like when that they're constantly playing stuff that you recognize, then it kind of hooks you.
But what I was going to say is I think J.J. Abrams as a creator is very comfortable making original stuff that looks and sounds and feels like a cover. He's one of those, and I'm trying to think of somebody who, off the top of my head, that be an artist like that who, his stuff sounds like, if you look at Super 8, it is entirely Steven Spielberg from the early 1980s, stuff like E.T. Or Close Encounters.
I'll say real quick. I mean, one of the music groups that I really like listening to, and flame me if you will, I like Walk the Moon. And it's all original stuff. I like Walk the Moon because it sounds like the music I grew up on in the 80s. It sounds like 80s music that's written today. So yeah.
No, and then that's just it. It's that idea of because even there was actually a a criticism of J.J. Abrams when he made the first Star Trek movie, his first reboot. They said no, he made a Star Wars movie. That is, he took all the sciencey, nerdy stuff that Trek fans love, and said no, he just simply gave us space magic. So he made us he put Star Wars into our Star Trek. So that's his that's what he likes to do.
That's his MO.
That's his MO. So not a surprise that he's bringing it here.
Dave's leaned into the microphone twice.
Right.
So.
Well, I just thought of a couple of other examples. Greta Van Fleet, who's like Led Zeppelin reincarnated or whatever, and I don't like them very much because of that. I feel like they're derivative, but that's one of the first examples that comes to mind for me when I think about JJ, because he's just, and personally, I've always struggled with JJ's movies a little bit. When I first watched that Star Trek film, I had significant problems with it, and finally I just had to say, well, turn off your brain, give it another go. And again, not to be too negative, that it ended up working for me. After it was like, okay, let me not go in with specific expectations about specific canon and just let this wash over me as entertainment, and was able to enjoy it. And I feel that way about pretty much every one of his films.
So here's another little quiz. In all of the lead up and all the press junkets and everything they did, what was the one word that all the cast and all the crew and everybody from Disney, what was the one word they used to describe this movie? Do you remember?
No.
It starts with an S.
Saga?
Satisfying. It's a satisfying end. It's a satisfying story. They use the word satisfying so many times. So again, talking about these people who were obviously satisfied. They were over the moon over this movie. What things in this movie you think satisfied them? What do you think made them go, let's get specific in the movies? Like, just, I mean...
and the other thing I can say, too, is that it's everything Last Jedi wasn't. And a lot of people have very strong feelings about Last Jedi.
Which I would like to take those people who, and I'm kind of one of them. I have my qualms with The Last Jedi, but it's like I would like to take the people who right now who are in their mid 40s like me, who think that Empire Strikes Back was God's gift to the world next to Jesus Christ, and take them as a mid 40s and show them Empire Strikes Back for the first time as a mid 40s,
right?
Because that was, and would they have, if we could do a mind wipe on them, you've never seen Empire Strikes Back before in your life, in your mid 40s, and now you're going to watch Empire, would they be going, oh my God, this is boring? It's a slow moving movie, really. I
agree with that thesis, and we can probably go into that forever and ever, because I really believe that's a lot of what's going on with that movie.
Which brings me to my point. Sorry to interrupt you. That I think what makes this satisfying to people is that it hit everybody. In that you have the young kids who really like Ray, Foe, and Pin. Lord, Ray. I stopped.
Ray, Poe, and Finn.
Yeah. Lord, maybe I had more than 2 beers last night. Anyway, when you have the big, they like those 3 characters, and so the younger generation, they got a lot of that this time. Then you have the kids who grew up with the prequels, and you see a battle droid, and you hear some of the voices from the prequels, and there's a lot of prequel references in the movie, so they felt satisfied. And then you have the old people like us, where we're still seeing Han Solo and Luke Skywalker, and we're
bring back Lando,
and we also bring back Lando. We also have that connection with Princess Leia and Carrie Fisher, and to see how her death was handled. Those things were satisfying to me, and Chewbacca gets his medal. So those are kind of my specifics that I think that's what they mean. But then we can get into the but later. So
right, we'll get into the but about the medal later.
I just think, again, if we're trying to ID why this movie would appeal to people in general, I think it being a course correction or at least perceived as being a course correction, will do it for a lot of folks.
I've heard somebody say that and maybe I said this in the previous podcast, that they didn't like The Last Jedi, but now they like The Last Jedi, having seen Rise of Skywalker. They said it made it a better movie. I would really like to sit down with that person and ask them a little bit more why. I would too,
because I feel stronger about The Last Jedi in the wake of this movie, and I think that's a credit to this movie. I was on the fence with Last Jedi for a number of years. Well, how long was it been out? 2
years.
That's so a number of years.
I was on the fence, and rewatching it recently, I was just struck by how much more I liked it after having seen Rise of Skywalker. So.
I find The Last Jedi, maybe it's, and this is the natural aspect of people tend to juxtapose. So you go, well, I didn't like Last Jedi. I clearly, like Rise of Skywalker, or I like Last Jedi. I don't like Rise of Skywalker. And that's not necessarily the case, because you can't like both. You can not like either. But what I found interesting is that looking at how Last Jedi, for all of its qualities and all of its flaws, is clearly a work with a theme and a thesis and a mission. And it's, Rise of Skywalker doesn't necessarily, it has its themes that it's playing with, but it's almost like it took some of what Last Jedi did and said, okay, we're going to take some pieces out and we're going to leave the rest, and then we're going to go back to Force Awakens, take some of those pieces out, and one of the good things that they did here is they said, okay, we got a lot of loose threads out here. We're going to tie as many of them as we can. And sometimes when people describe something satisfying, it could be as simple as, you have answered my question in a way that makes it make sense to me.
Well, let me, and so maybe this is going to start transitioning us into why some people have that visceral, my God, this was the worst thing I've ever seen reaction. But that word satisfying bugged me from the minute I heard it. And I watched, I saw the press junkets and things like that. And everybody, that was obviously the word they were told to use.
Right.
And that was the talking point. And so here's the thing. It drove me nuts, though, when I'm going to go back to that band that I was in. I'm making set lists. And it drove me nuts to sit there and just program stuff that I knew the audience was going to like. Myself as a performer, that is going to make me just go, ugh, I don't want to play this song again. It's like a documentary on the Eagles. There's a scene where Glenn Fry is talking about, Randy Meisner, they're going to go out to play their encore, and their encore was always Take It to the Limit. And Randy Meisner's like, no, I don't want to do that song. I'm tired of that song. Said, and I'm not feeling all that well. I don't play. And Glenn Fry's like, you got a lot of people who just paid a ton of money to come hear you sing, Take It to the Limit. He said, do you think I like singing Peaceful, Easy Feeling? And, others, he said, every night? No, but that's what they want. So it is that tough thing. It's like, so satisfying. Okay, I really want to create something for you as an artist. How much do I have? But they're not going to like this if I do this.
In this case, we're the squeakiest wheels getting the oil, so to speak, because you're talking about trying to make the most amount of people happy, and that feels like the biggest mission of the movie, period. So it's like, okay, so this section of the fan base is particularly noisy about this factor, so let's give them that. And it, in that sense, it felt a little bit like Attack of the Clones, in the way that George kind of overcorrected from Phantom Menace, in some respects.
And I think I just think age and perspective has so much to do with this, because I remember as a 10-year-old watching Return of the Jedi, that even before they changed it to Jedi Rocks, and they have, was it Loppy Neck? They do the little song and dance thing in Jabba's palace. Well, I remember thinking, well, this is goofy, but I didn't go, that was the worst thing ever. But however, when I got into my 20s and the special editions come out and they do Jedi Rocks, like, what are you doing? This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And now that I'm in my 40s, if they were to do something different, I'd probably just get out the
McClunky.
Yeah, McClunky. There you go. torch and pitchfork right time. So I think it's important when we hear, when I really do pay attention to, okay, that person is from this generation making this comment. So I do want to transition though. So as I'm talking pitchforks and torches, the people who had the pitchforks and torches, a couple, we still need to bring our friend on here who sent me a text and said he almost walked out of the movie. Said it was one of the worst movies he's ever seen. Another friend who he posted on Facebook, yes, I saw it. No, I did not like it, and I'm not going to discuss it. I mean, that sounds like, man, a bad Christmas, with the family type of thing. So what do we think? And there's other people, what Brittany said when you got here, one of her former students said, what was the
I'd rather be digested in the Sarlacc pit
for 1,000 years than watch the Rise of Skywalker again. So why are these people so angry?
So okay, I've heard a couple of kind of reasons for it. The first reason I've heard is that it is.
Hey, calm down.
I know. No, the first reason I've heard that it's the breakneck pace of it. It's a movie that does not slow down. Now, again, going back to J.J. Abrams' qualities, that's part of his MO, is to give you satisfying action. He's trying to appease you, and this is a movie that starts off with a battle scene, and within 5 minutes we're into an action chase, and within 10 minutes, we're into another chase. So it's a movie that doesn't stop, but at the same time, it's not like it's a satisfying sequence of events, or not at all of them is. He's using very much a shotgun approach. So that's one thing I've heard, that it's a lot of pace, but it doesn't, there's also a lot of, particularly at the start, I've heard a lot of people complain about an info dump. And this is kind of where we can get into the, maybe the idea of, did J.J. Abrams try to do whole episode 8 and 9 in one movie? Because it feels like, particularly the first third of the movie, he's just throwing stuff at you. And sometimes that can be good for people. Like if they were not necessarily pleased with The Last Jedi, they could be, oh yeah, please give me all this. But some people can go, what the heck are you doing? What's going on? It makes no sense.
Can I say, we're talking about, like in 5-10 years, what the panel I want to see at Comic-Con or Star Wars Celebration is? I want to see Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams sitting on the stage
I don't know if
at the same time.
I don't think that'll happen.
Anyway, okay, right. keep going about things you're hearing.
No, but anyway, those tend to be, so the pace, some of the dialogue, and really, but primarily I think it's that sense of, at the start, it takes a long time to get going because you're just getting a ton of information. And then some of it is simply that they don't like the course correction that they've taken with this movie. I've read some parts, some people saying, look, I like The Last Jedi. I like the direction that the trilogy was headed there. This swerve right back around and pile crashed us, right back into the most incestuous galaxy far, far away. So
I can talk
go for it.
A lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the maybe I'll transition into this article that I was reading, which we've probably apart from this show have talked about, like, is he trying to do too much? Is he trying to fit too much in this film? And again, you can talk about the why. Was he potentially boxed into a corner? Is he just, not willing to let go of some of those mystery boxes that he previously established? Is he just trying to tell too much story all at once? Again, the why isn't so much as important to me as the fact that I think he's trying to do a lot, period. Yeah. I mean, like, this is, and for me, some of those punches landed and some of them didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I mean, like, if you want to step back from it and get philosophical about it and say, well, what was his batting average? Was it this or was it that? I think you can find a lot of value in the film if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
But for people who hated it, I think a lot of them just were like, that didn't work, and they're checked out. And at that point, you're going to have a hard time getting them back in. And again, trying to do too much can play into that. I one of the things about The Force Awakens that I adore is how much care he takes in establishing this universe and these people, these characters that we haven't met before. Particularly really with Rey. We just have quiet moments of her scavenging and then living her life. We get to see a day in the life of Rey. And that's essential to establishing her character and beginning to figure out, like, okay, so how does she relate to this story and these people around her? And you get a very, very dense picture of that right away. And I love that about that movie. Mm-hmm. And in this movie, you can juxtapose it with Force Awakens in that, well, okay, we got all our characters already, so we're just going. And it's going to, I think that depth of knowledge, when you talk about maybe like a great work of art, and this is how we refer to these movies as art, you can kind of tell if somebody is, if they spent 4 days on a piece versus 4 months.
Yeah.
And that's an extreme statement, but it applies both to these smaller strokes within the film itself, but also to the film at large. It's like, did they give enough time to building the movie itself? And there was an article that came out recently that I'd read that made the argument they should have postponed the release date like 5 months, have it come out in May, the traditional Star Wars slot.
Oh, don't say that, because for us, yes, it's May, but for the prequel kid, or actually for, I don't know,
it's actually a sequel.
The younger kids, it's like Christmas is when Star Wars is released. It's like not for the previous 30 years. It's like always May. But anyway,
sorry. I like Christmas release dates, but I guess the argument could be made that this film needed more polish. And this writer made that argument. I think it was the Forbes article. Scott Mendelson, I think, or is that? Have I got his name right?
We hope so.
I hope I got his name right. Let me look it up.
Well, while you look it up, I'll just say one of the things we should keep in mind as we discuss, and not just us, but everybody discuss Rise of Skywalker, is to remember J.J. Abrams was not the original choice. The original plan was J.J. was going to do Episode 7, Rian Johnson does Episode 8, and Colin Trevorrow, who directed Jurassic World, was going to do Episode 9.
But that's the director, so they always had a
writer.
They always had the writer Colin. Chris Terrio doing the writing.
But Chris Terrio, if you look at the final credits, it's Chris Terrio and J.J. Abrams. So clearly, whatever plan was going to happen originally kind of fell somewhat by the way when Trevorrow exited for creative differences. And they even made a big deal of announcing, oh, we're bringing back J.J. Now, they're bringing him back with, okay, we need you to start filming within a few weeks and let's go, because we have to meet this December 2019 deadline. So to that argument from that Force article, Dave.
Yeah, it is Scott Mendelson, by the way.
It makes perfect sense. The idea of maybe you should have pushed it back, because it wouldn't have given you more filming time, but what it does, it gives you more time in the editing room. And everybody always says Star Wars was saved in the editing room.
So here's my point that we're making, in my living room earlier was that, and I've said it several times, I think where the thing that made the sequel trilogy difficult is having 3 different story writers. Mm-hmm. That, in the prequels and in the original saga, it was always the story by George Lucas. Different screenwriters, and they had script doctors come in and stuff like that. But that's different than having somebody saying, here's the story.
Right.
And the director's job is then to make that story. So it's kind of, I was thinking about this earlier. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban was the first movie I ever saw where I read the book first. Mm-hmm. And I'd never been so mad at a movie in all of my life. Brittany laughed at me because I'm just so mad because they changed this and they changed that and they changed this thing over here, and that's not the way this story went. And she's like, my world, welcome to it, because every movie she goes to see, she's read the books, Mm-hmm. So, we don't have that in Star Wars, really. The book comes after. But I think where this, again, the sequel trilogy had a problem is, I'm just guessing here, but it seems like they didn't have, all right, Dave's going to write the first one, Fredo's going to write the second one, Aaron's going to write the third one. Now, if you're going to help the three of us out, we could write 3 great Star Wars movies, which they did. I thought I liked, Force Awakens. I liked The Last Jedi. I thought Rian Johnson wrote I love that movie, but I think he wrote it inside of a box, and so I don't think Lucasfilm and whatever this story group is, I don't think they gave them, okay, here are the beats. This is the general direction where all of this is going. They can go back and say the Emperor was part of this the whole time. I think that is BS.
No,
I don't agree with that at all. That's them saving their butt a little bit because they've been taking some heat on this. But they need to say, all right, Dave, Aaron, and Fredo, you're going to write your 3 movies, but here's where we're going to start, and here's where we got to get to, and in the middle we need something like this happening, and you can write your story around those. And instead you had 3 stories that they don't coalesce.
So in a recent interview, Chris Terry actually did come out and say that no, the Emperor wasn't in the original plans. He actually came out and said that they had to bring him in order to justify the method of having Ben Solo's redemption. The original, but the moment that Kylo Ren kills Snoke in Last Jedi, well, there goes the big bad of this sequel trilogy. So they eventually, at some point between him and J.J. Abrams, they went, what if we bring Palpatine back? We said, we need a big bad that they can face off against. He's the ultimate big bad. And they went to Kathleen Kennedy and she's like, sure, let's do it. So no, Palpatine was not in the original ideas when the sequel trilogy was being designed. And the very scriptwriter who wrote this is telling you that, and that tells you, okay, no, this was not cohesive. Like so much else in Star Wars, this was made up on the fly.
But then they doubled down, and it was, because the original story, even heard J.J. Abrams say that the great thing about Rey is that anybody can be the hero. Mm-hmm. And he could have stuck with that, even with all the things Rian Johnson did. He could have stuck with that in The Rise of Skywalker, but no, we're going to make Rey a Palpatine. And that was the thing I remember when, after Force Awakens came out, the whole, who were Rey's parents? And everybody's like, oh, she's Luke's. And,
Obi-Wan's.
And I was like thinking, okay, maybe she is Luke's daughter. That's a possibility because we're talking 30 years, but then people who said Obi-Wan, I was like, come on, the dude's, that's why I'm really skeptical about this Obi-Wan series coming up, because if he goes off, his job right then is to watch over the savior of the galaxy, and if he's off, on a date with somebody and then knocks her up and makes Rey, it's then the math doesn't work. So Obi-Wan,
he's not making Rey.
that really ticked me off. And then, I always thought it was kind of, maybe she was Han and Leia's, my theory was that they had Ben and sent him off with Uncle Luke, and then Ben starts getting all evil, and meanwhile Han and Leia get busy and they make Rey, but didn't tell anybody about it. And it's like, oh crud, her brother's psycho over here. We need to send her off world, to keep her safe. So it would have mirrored that separate Luke and Leia, type of thing, so the Emperor could. That was my theory. Throw that out the window if you want to. But the one that always, now we're sitting here, Palpatine, really? So we're, it's like, do
the math. When did Palpatine get busy?
Well, he was the most powerful person in the world. You can, they can, I don't know, get Star Wars hookers, I suppose. But, but eventually, but those are things that, yes, we just, that's going to be the title of this episode.
Now you have to think about that.
That's going to be the title of this episode. Star Wars hookers.
The gears are turning in my head of like, are we going to need to edit this? And if so, how are we going to need to edit this?
So I think people who are upset, they really like that, again, where Rian Johnson, but also where J.J. Abrams was coming from, that Rey was,
nobody,
that anybody can be the hero. And now all of a sudden, nope, you got to be a special bloodline, and I think people were upset by that. But then it's also just having to connect the dots again of like, all right, so then now are we going to get a book of Palpatine's long lost love or his one night of, affair or whatever, and then we got to learn
one
about
night in Coruscant.
You know, I don't know. It just seemed like I think they could have told that whole story without her being a Palpatine.
I think the twist in this is that she comes from the Palpatine bloodline, and yet she's good. And Kylo comes from the Skywalker bloodline, and yet he's bad until the end. And so, like, that whole idea was something that, again, we go back to the Harry Potter references. We can draw Harry Potter comparisons forever because
I was really worried that this was going to become another Harry Potter movie, but it didn't. So
well, that was a major part of that story, which was Harry was, you know, this mudblood of, you know, poor upbringing, and then you have the compare and contrast between that and Voldemort, who on the surface would seem to have a leg up on him.
But Harry wasn't a mudblood, though. He was born of wizard and a witch.
Oh, well, I mean, like, he was raised by mudbloods.
Sure,
but yeah, I mean, yeah. So
boy, this is a nerdy podcast.
Yeah.
The idea being two people can have similar backgrounds. One can turn out good, one can turn out bad, right?
Yeah.
And then in here, it's kind of flipped slightly, which is one person can be raised in a loving environment, but then turn out kind of rotten,
like a little jerk.
and then another person could be raised in a terrible environment and turn out good. So I kind of see what they're going with that. And I also get the rhyming of it. Star Wars always rhymes. We have these themes that just reoccur over and over and over again. And so I understand, like, okay, so this name and this villain is huge within Star Wars, so let's resurface it and let's try to do it in an interesting way. But it's only going to be satisfying for people who came up with that theory in the first place.
Well, what I was going to say is, watching it the other day or yesterday, the second time, I was really struck about how this movie's central theme is about legacy. It's about children, you know, or grandchildren in this case. You know, the entire, even if you want to juxtapose the entire sequel trilogy, the concept of you are living, I mean, in this movie, they have Rey and Ben literally fighting in the remains of where their parents and grandparents were fighting to the death. And they're doing the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. So, and how Palpatine was so desperate to get Rey that he has sent an assassin to kill his own child, his own son and his wife, because he's trying to live forever. He's trying to cheat death. And so he figures the only way he can cheat death is with this child. Meanwhile, you have Han, who sacrificed himself for his son, Leia, who's sacrificing herself for her son. You know, they're trying to do everything that they can to redeem Ben Solo back, whereas Palpatine, always only ever interested in himself, is trying to turn the one good thing that came out of him towards the darkness.
So one of the funny things, I was watching a Kevin Smith reaction to this, and he said, well, they're asked about, you know, the thing that made me groan. There was one time in the movie that I just went, ugh. It was at the very end, and that's when they kiss. No. You know, it's when Rey and Kylo kiss. We talked about it a little bit, and I thought it was totally unnecessary. But what Kevin Smith's point of view was, like, it's like Kylo Ren won the internet in that moment, or J.J. Abrams won the internet at that moment, because you have half the people who are like, you know, the Reylo people who are like, you know, they need to be together and blah, 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 blah. And then you got the other people who are like, you know, that son of a gun needs to die because he killed Han Solo, you jerk. And then so he kisses, and everybody's like, this half's like, yay. And then he dies right away. So that half's like, yay. So at that moment, he won the internet. It's like, so
that goes to my biggest critique of the movie right there. And I think, like, that just hits at the heart of it, which to me is that he's trying to have his cake and eat it too in this movie. And every major bold decision that they made during the course of this runtime, they undid. You talk about Chewie's death. Mm-hmm. You look at C-3PO's mind wipe. You look at Reylo. I mean, we could probably dedicate a whole episode to Reylo. I was very much against the very concept of it because I felt like a lot of people did that you really can't redeem this individual. But the heart wants what the heart wants. So once they kissed, I'm like, all right, I'm in. Okay, let's see what happens here because this can end poorly as heck, and that's the only way that this will end.
That sounds like all of our first dates.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
she chose, this guy who's irredeemable, and I honestly would have loved to see that play out. Let's see them go to Tatooine together, start a life off the grid, see what kind of trouble they get into.
Oh, Dave, you and I can't be friends anymore.
It would have been different.
well,
Right? It would have been different. And that's my biggest
that was
critique.
actually, so I'm going to digress a bunch because that was my big fear about when we came into The Force Awakens. We knew we were going to have Han and Leia and Luke in this movie. And my big fear was that I was going to see domesticated Han Solo. That there's going to be Han and Leia doing dishes. And it's like, have you walked the dog yet today? No, I haven't, So that was my big fear. But I just thought, okay, talk about what could have happened. I'm just saying there was no reason for it except to make half of the internet happy at that point. And I think that's why some people are over the moon with it, and that's why some people are mad as hell about it. And because there's in the grand scheme of the story, and again, I go back to she doesn't have to be a Palpatine for if you take away that aspect of it, it still is just fine. It could be like, bring back the Emperor all you want. That's great. Fine. I'm with you. I disagree with, I wish they would have kind of, pardon me, eased us into it a little bit. Like, is the Emperor back? Type of thing. But no, in the crawl, it's like, Emperor's back. Deal with it. Okay, fine. I'm past that. I'm past that. But everything it could have been just, she's, just as powerful as you, or she needs to be, offed, whatever. She doesn't need to be a Palpatine, so she could have remained just a person. So that part, and then, so again, this, and the kiss, it could have been just what if you want to talk about what ifs, what if he mirrored the Han Solo thing where he just puts his hand on her cheek and just kind of, the thumb goes down the cheek and then he collapses. I mean, that would have been a better choice, but to have them kiss, that made half the internet go, yay. So I agree with Kevin Smith on this. And then when he dies, the other half goes, yay. So
I think that's the point. He's trying to make too many people happy.
But I say that's another one of the bigger criticisms that we have of this movie. They are chock full of fan service. Rey needs to be somehow related to the characters we've seen before. We make her a Palpatine. Reylo, we're going to have a kiss. Chewie getting a medal. There's no reason in this story, in this chapter, for Chewie to get a medal for anything beyond making you, Dave, and I happy because in 1977, Chewie didn't get a medal, and we've been mad about it for 40 some odd years.
So we've been in negative land for a while. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to positive land because I was just thinking about some things that made me go over the moon on this movie and what I know people were really hoping for and didn't have, let's just face it, in The Last Jedi and not so much in The Force Awakens. But, I mean, some things that I think they really dug. First of all, huge space battle. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of, TIE fighters and Millennium Falcon shooting at each other and, and X-Wings and stuff like that. So we had a huge space battle.
We got two different chase sequences.
Yeah. So we had that aspect. That was really good. A lot of lightsaber fighting, as goofy as it was. A lot of lightsaber fighting. And that was something that has been really kind of missing. Even though if you look back on it, I mean, we're like, Star Wars is about lightsaber fighting. And it's like, you get about 5 minutes in A New Hope. You get about 10 minutes in Empire. And you get about 10 minutes in Jedi. But this movie was filled with lightsaber fighting.
Can I say one moment that actually made me smirk or kind of laugh the second time I saw it? So towards the final battle, when Rey puts Luke's lightsaber behind her back, and Ben draws it out. No, son, the Knights of Ren step back, and he kind of bows to them like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
Yeah, again, no, it was more like, yeah, you're going to get your...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I kind of love that moment just because it's like one of the few times that we get actual personality coming through that isn't mandated. It's just I can do this.
Other things that people were really over the moon about, like my wife, for example. I mean, we really saw the connection between, Rey, Poe, and Finn. I said it right this time. We saw that connection and actually left her wanting more. She wants more of that story. And there was enough. So, of course, you have classic Star Destroyers. But then let's go over to the negative side. It's like, can we be done with planet-killing weapons?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're done with that. I'll go back to Reylo. I was never a Reylo fan, at all. But good Lord, the stuff that they did in this movie to satisfy that fan base, and then offed him, it drives me nuts because you could have done something new. We've never seen two Force users like this in love.
I don't think it's ever established that they are in love. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's where they're headed.
But that's not anymore. But that's what it. I think the story could have been. When she said, yes, I wanted to take your hand. I wanted to take Ben's hand.
Right.
And it, but Ben is dead. And that type of thing. I still think it sends a very bad message that to that. When your daughters get into, dating range, and if they are, starting to date some guy who's mentally abusive to them and manipulative, you're not going to sit there and say, well, kids, they're still good in him. You're going to say, get that guy out of my house. No, you don't need that. Because it's like maybe that's not very nice of me, but it's like, you need to, I think it would have sent a huge, very bad message, especially to all these little girls who look up to Rey. It's like, but yeah, go for the bad boy.
I thought it was a bad idea to begin with, but once they committed to putting it on film, all right, let's see where it goes.
Where did they commit to put it on film?
When they kissed.
Well, at the end, yes, but I'm talking about if you talk about the previous movies, that was everybody just writing their own fan fiction because they sat around a campfire together.
Well, do you know when it happened? The moment that they shipped Finn and Poe together. The moment they went, Finn and Poe got to be, they hugged, so they got to like him. Well, who does Rey end up with? Well, clearly Kylo Ren.
Well, I'm gonna back up again. It's just because I think there's a vast majority of the younger population, these damn kids need to get off my lawn, who don't understand the difference between intimacy and romance. Well, but they don't see a difference there because it's like there can be a connection between two people of the opposite sex or the same sex. That doesn't mean that they have to get it on.
Well, let's say that in Star Wars lore, it rhymes. The cute girl ends up, most often than not, ends up with the bad boy. I mean, Padme ended up with Anakin, and Leia ended up with Han.
So here's another. So I'll get us away from this here. Here's another thing that I've heard, and get your guys' take on this, is that people think that this movie negates, and this is why people are really, again, torch and pitchfork, that it negates Anakin's sacrifice in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything to me. I'm sorry, that just doesn't.
I'm not saying it means anything to me. I've heard that argument that it's like. His sacrifice now means nothing. He still
nothing. Made the sacrifice. He still sacrificed his life for his son.
And here's the real world. Here's the real world in relation to this. So I'll shoot that out of the water. Is that World War I, World War II? A lot of people fought and died in World War I to keep freedom and democracy safe, and to keep people free. And a bad person still came around. And we had to do it all over again. Right. So I think Anakin can sacrifice himself for his son and get rid of the most evil person, but there's always going to be another evil person coming back, So I think that argument is kind of a weak one, but I think it's interesting that a lot of people are. It's like it,
I think it's coming mostly from people who were sold, and this is always the difficult aspect of the job that Lucasfilm and before them 20th Century Fox did. When Return of the Jedi came out, it was sold as the end of the saga. This is it. This is the end. We're buttoning up, done. And so seeing Anakin throwing the Emperor down the reactor shaft is definitive. It's like, okay, we are done. This is over. And then when Revenge of the Sith came out, oh, this is it, this is the end, and we're getting told for the third time, this is the end, this is it, we're not. So when you keep telling people this is the end, you want to have something that feels conclusive, that feels definitive. So the fact that you went back to the last definitive act and undid it can cause some people to go, wait a second, you mean to tell me all the stuff you were selling me 30 some odd years ago was bunk? And now here we are and you're going to sell it to me again? It's like, imagine if somebody, came in and sold you something and then took it back and tried to sell it to you again the second time. You're like, well, wait a minute, you're selling me this thing I just bought a while back.
So real quick, just going around the horn, one word answer. Do you think this is the end of the Skywalker saga? Dave?
No.
Fredo?
Nope.
Because they're going to need to buy Christmas presents at some point,
Look, Disney paid billions of dollars for this franchise, for this property. They are making TV shows and they are making movies and they're going to be making video games, they're making cartoons and comic books and the whole nine, because they're going to get your money.
So we're coming up, we've kind of run around the table a lot. But here's something. I'm going to go back to The Last Jedi. When my friend who I've known since preschool, he sent me a text and he's like, I'm taking the family to go see The Last Jedi. I'm really nervous because I'm seeing all these bad reactions online. He said, what do you recommend? And I said, what we've talked about before. I said, leave your expectations at the door. It's a totally different Star Wars movie. Just chuck your expectations and just go in and enjoy. And he didn't. And so he hated The Last Jedi, loved The Rise of Skywalker. So if you had that friend who sent you a message and said, I'm going to go see The Rise of Skywalker, and I got half the people over here on my Facebook feed are saying it's the greatest thing ever, and I got these other people over here who are saying that it's awful and I almost walked out, what would you say to that person? Dave, we'll start with you.
I'd just say the same thing. I mean, honestly, there's not much more that you can tell a person other than to just go into it with as open a mind as you possibly can. I feel like expectations for me personally were lowered when I saw some of the reviews for the film were less than positive. Usually the initial reactions from the people who get to see the movie the first night are glowing, and they weren't. And so for me personally, I was able to, okay, so this is going to divide some folks. I should lower my own expectations, but also go in with an open mind. And that's what I would recommend to anybody who hasn't seen it yet. Though, if you've listened to this entire podcast at this point, I don't know if you should go watch it now. Now the whole thing's spoiled.
I guess, and look, this can apply not just to going to see Rise of Skywalker, but this can also apply to any future Star Wars media product, whether it's a TV show, a series, whatever. Except that there will be things in it that you like and things that you may not like. And here's the thing. You don't know what you're going to like and not like until you do it. All you can do is experience it and then know whether you liked it or you didn't. At the same time, though, you have to, acknowledge that not maybe a lot of the stuff that's going to be made, it's going to be done under a different lens. It's interesting looking at this sequel trilogy. This was the first time that it was done by people who grew up under Star Wars. George Lucas grew up with Flash Gordon and Kurosawa films and Westerns. And he poured all that into making Star Wars. This was J.J. Abrams, Chris Terrio. This was Rian Johnson. This was Lawrence Kasdan. Maybe not Lawrence Kasdan, but by and large, the creative forces behind this trilogy were people who grew up with Star Wars. Kind of like we said about The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau mashing his action figures together. I'm pretty sure he grew up with Star Wars action figures. So did Taika Waititi, and so did everybody making The Mandalorian, and Dave Filoni, and everybody else making all the other shows. So sometimes I recognize that the people making Star Wars love Star Wars, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be your Star Wars.
Well, okay, so first of all, I'll say what I would say to people, and it's the same type of thing. Just leave your expectations at the door. But the other thing I'd remind people is that you're not 10.
Yeah.
You know, you're not 10 anymore.
Don't chase the high.
And just remember that, you know, there are going to be things, you know, because we're all beaten down by life, things like that. And it's, if you're going into any movie, you know, especially in this Star Wars saga, now that we're 9 movies in, if you're hoping that you're going to get that same feeling that you had when you saw episode 4 when you were, you know, 7 years old or whatever, you know, then you probably need to go see a therapist, because there's things not going well in your life that you need to sort out if you're searching for that feeling again. You know, again, I like the memes that saw that was, again, this, I'm just going in, seeing a Star Wars movie is just, I'm elated that at 46 years old that there are still Star Wars movies to be seen. I think it's fun, you know, and now that, again, that I can be, you know, I can be critical about things as well.
It's like, I was just going to say, using your band metaphor, if you're expecting to see the Eagles, or a band that you saw at age 17, at age 47, and they're going to be sounding just the same, and they're going to play just the same, and it's going to be the exact same reaction, you're going to be disappointed, because they're not the same. It's not going to be exactly the same, and you're not going to get the same reaction, but you're still going to get a great show.
So I think you were mentioning something, Fredo, that I think would be a good conversation for us to have in a future episode. So somebody take notes on this, because how many times have we heard people over the moon about The Mandalorian, about Star Wars is back? This is my brother said, this is the best Star Wars content he's seen since 1983. This is, you know, they're over the moon about how this is, like I said, this is Star Wars. The sequel trilogy, you hear a lot of people saying it's not Star Wars. So again, it goes back to that original question. What makes it Star Wars? What are we missing here, that, or who's missing what, or who's hitting what, you know? And is it about, hey, that's that thing that I saw in that movie over there, or hey, there's that thing that I recognize, or, you know, or what, you know, I think that's just, there's a really big conversation to be had there about what is Star Wars.
And is it a question that can be objectively answered, or is it all subjective? Because that's the harder part about Star Wars. It's on an objective level, it's a series of movies and now TV shows.
Well, and that's the other thing that would go into my, you know, suggestion to people is that not really my suggestion to somebody who's like tentative about going to see the movie, but it's that art, if done well, draws these conversations. If everybody goes and looks at a piece of art and says, that's awesome, then I think the artist failed. That it should elicit different responses, you know, from people, because you bring your stuff in. And that's the glory of art, is that we can go and we can look at, you know, a piece and we can, you know, argue about it, and we can, but if everybody goes in and says, yeah, that was good, then I think something is missing there. Yeah. Or it's suspect anyway.
Yeah, and to dovetail off of what Fredo was just saying, it's like you can look at things objectively or subjectively. And a lot of people, when certain sections of the internet get very negative about certain parts of Star Wars, and a lot of the time they attempt to break things down objectively. Oh, this is not framed well. This piece of dialogue does not work. The acting, etc. And I think those are fair critiques. We're just sitting around. We're trying to decide, you know, what makes this good, what makes this not good. There's so much subjectivity that goes into all of this.
Well, let's go back to the beginning where we talked about that value is not the same as liking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, that it's, yeah, I mean, because the liking part is the subjective part. You know, right. That's the subjective part.
I mean, you can go to, you know, you can pay $100 to go get a pair of Saints tickets, go see a game. It's a great game, and the Saints lose. Objectively, you got value. Subjectively, you hate it because your team lost.
Yeah. Well, I don't know why you brought that up a couple days before we play Minnesota, and my playoff tickets are in the mail, so I don't know why you brought that up, Fredo.
Actually, I was bringing up the San Francisco game from a few weeks ago because that was a great game that we lost by 2 points.
Well, oh my God, the NFC Championship last year.
Exactly.
I mean, that ended horribly. But oh my God, I probably saw one of the probably the greatest endings to a football game that you ever see.
And you never want to see it again.
I never want to see it again, but it's like I was part of that, So Dave, you look like you have some final thoughts.
Not particularly.
We're both out of beer, so
I think that's the key.
This is not our our final delve into. We got a lot of stuff planned for talking about the Rise of Skywalker, and I think it'll be fun to get some other perspectives in here.
I'll say one more positive thing. So we end on a positive note here, because I feel like we got a little negative, and we're trying not to get too negative. I really enjoyed the parts of Star Wars. Part of the reason it appeals to me is this whole mythical talisman, Indiana Jones style quest, adventure thing that was completely laid to waste in Last Jedi. And again, I adore that movie, but
he had a slow speed space and space chase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we didn't have anything of that. He's like, oh, you value Luke's lightsaber, for example? Let's blow it in half. These kinds of mystery boxes that JJ...
Here you got two.
Yeah.
Here you got Luke and Leia's.
Yeah, and JJ just loves that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did appreciate a return to that kind of thing. And I think that is a point in this movie's favor.
So I was just going to say, I was thinking if I had one more thing to talk about, just simply... I love the overall message that the movie ends up on, which is something that forgot Poe's girlfriend, Kerry Russell. That's actually Kerry Russell on the helmet.
Yeah, Zori Bliss.
Zori Bliss, thank you. That she gives him. It says they win by making you think you're alone. There's more of us than there's of them, and it's a message that gets repeated by Poe to the Resistance, and then gets repeated again by Lando to Poe when he shows up with the biggest armada, and the two First Order officers are like, where did they get this armada? Where did they get this navy? And they're like, that's not a navy, that's just people. People just decide to come in and fight you because they're tired of you. And I think that's a very powerful message as we head into 2020, as we look at the world the way it is. If you think that it's just you, recognize that you're not alone, and that there's more good people out there than bad people, and that's a good message to put in any movie.
And I think another big message from the movie, and this is my final thoughts, is that family is not just blood.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like when Brittany and I moved to New Orleans, knowing nobody, and now we have a family, that we're not related to by blood at all, and that's such a blessing. And so when Rey says, I'm a Skywalker, it's kind of like Brittany and I saying, we're New Orleanians, because these people embraced us and, took us in, as part of their city. You guys, are part of that family. It doesn't take anything away from the people that we're related to back in Nebraska or other parts in the world, but it's, family is not just about blood, so I think that's, when people are feeling lonely, when people are feeling lost, it's like, that's, I think that's just a really powerful message. So on that, we got a good hour in on what ticks people off and what makes people happy about the Rise of Skywalker. But, and we haven't even scratched the surface. But we want to thank you for listening to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi, and find us on Podbean, Facebook, Twitter. Tell your friends, even those in Miami. We like everybody. So just not your football teams. And for example, Minnesota. Go Saints on Sunday here. So round 1. So with that, we'll say Who Dat?
Who Dat?
Who Dat?
And we'll see you on the flip side.
McConkey.